Hi, I'm Rita. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Life Worth Reading. And welcome to my March and April wrap-up. This year I've been trying to do, instead of monthly wrap-ups, like 2 months at a time. It will change if I start to read more during a month, but so far it's working fine for me. And today I have 8 books to tell you about that I read during March and April. Unfortunately, I did not have any like 5 stars, like screaming 5 stars, but I did have some that were close to it, and overall I feel like they were good reading months for me. So without further ado, let's just get into it. This time, instead of talking about the books in the order that I read them, I'm going to talk from the lowest rated to the highest rated. So without further ado, let's just get into it. And the lowest rated book that I read in this month, and probably one of my least favorites of the year so far, is actually The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. This is a book that I picked up in one of my last reading vlogs, and it's a book that I've been meaning to read for a little bit. It was released in September of last year, so it's not even, it hasn't even been a year since it's out, and it's about this girl who escapes from her settlement colony in the US, and she is trying to survive in the Vaster Wilds. This is my bad. I really thought that this book would be a little bit more action heavy. I thought we would have a bigger story. I thought she would be escaping till she reached someplace else, and it wasn't that. This was literally just her trying to survive. It was like watching an episode of Bear Grylls, and although that is interesting, I just found it to be very repetitive, and it just wasn't what I was looking for. With that being said, I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. I did really enjoy the writing in this, and I did like some of the reflections that we have, because we do have this girl who remains unnamed throughout the book, and there are a lot of reflections about what it means to be a servant during this time. She came from a wealthy family in Britain, and they joined a settlement colony in the US, and what it means to be a woman during this time, and especially a servant. There were a lot of really hard descriptions to read about the struggles that they faced during this time. Hunger, famine, actually, just diseases, and it was very hard to read at some points. And I did like some of the reflections that we had when she was in the wild. She also reflected a lot about God, nature, man's place on earth, and there were some interesting points. I just didn't really like the overall story, but I think it's just because I was expecting something else. If this sounds interesting to you, just know that that's all that there is here, and it's very introspective and it's very repetitive, and it's just her trying to eat and trying to survive in the forest. But if that sounds like something that could be appealing to you, the writing is great, and we do have a lot of moments of reflection that I really enjoyed reading. But with that being said, I couldn't give it higher than a 2.5, like maybe a 3, but I still disliked it a little bit more than I liked it. So unfortunately, this is my lowest rated of the year so far, and still not a book that I hated. I liked it fine. Next up, we have Tomb Sweeping by Alexandra Chang. Unfortunately, this book was also a little bit disappointing. I bought it because of the cover. I was so excited to get to it, and it just really didn't do the trick for me. This is a collection of short stories about a lot of topics. We have Asian American immigrant experience, and we have a lot of other topics as well. It's a big collection, and I ended up just not loving a lot of the stories. I think I only really loved, I have all my ratings here. I really only ended up loving one, which was the shortest short story in here, which was Li Fan. I gave that 5 stars, and I gave a few of them 4 stars, and then others like 3, 3.5, and then there were some that I just really didn't like. And overall, my rating turned out to 3.1, which is honestly how I felt about this book. I do love a short story collection, so that's not the fault of the book. I'm one of those people that can actually get really invested in a short story, but This one just didn't really call out to me. I just didn't really feel a connection to a lot of the stories. I wish they were more introspective. I wish we had a little bit more substance to them, but we didn't. And the writing also wasn't mind-blowing as well. I just thought it was a little bit disappointing. There's not a lot that I can tell you about this. If you do love short story collections, maybe give it a listen if you find the audiobook, but overall it just really wasn't interesting enough. It didn't stand out enough for me to give it a higher rating. Honestly, there are much better short story collections out there, unfortunately, because I really do love this cover. Then we have Rest and Be Thankful by Emma Glass. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. This is a really short novella about a pediatric nurse that is working, and she is also going through a lot of stuff in her personal life. Her boyfriend just broke up with her. Boyfriend or husband? I'm not sure actually if it's her husband or not, but it doesn't really matter. Here it says, Laura is a nurse on a pediatric unit. On long, quiet shifts, she and her colleagues, clad in different shades of blue, care for sick babies, handling their exquisitely fragile bodies, carefully calibrating the mysterious machines that keep them alive. This was very hard to read. I really don't like reading about babies and children suffering, so it was very hard to read. It's not gratuitous or anything. Like, this is, especially the author, she is a pediatric nurse, so everything that she's writing, even though it is fiction, it is from a real place, you know? And that's what made it very much hard to read as well, because we have this exhausted nurse and she just has so much suffering and so much trauma from the way that things go in this pediatric unit, and it's so hard to see the parents' relationship to the sick children. It was just really hard to read, but I also really appreciated it. I thought that the writing was really great, and the ending really gave me chills. I'm not really sure if I understood it correctly. It's a little bit open ending, but if I understood it the way that it was planned, then it's very chilling. And I don't know, I just really, first of all, I love the Ophelia cover, and I think that nurses, doctors overall, like the medical board, really do deserve praise for what they do and how they deal with things, because this was really hard to read, and I just feel for everyone that dedicates their lives to save people, especially babies. It's so hard to read, but yeah, I ended up really enjoying this book. It's just not mind-blowing. I couldn't really, you know, like, it's a short novella. It didn't change my life, but it was something that was really heartbreaking to read. Then also 3.5, we have Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. What can I say about this book? I just read this book in my most recent vlog, if you want to go check it out, and I felt very meh about it. There's a lot more that I like than what I dislike, hence a 3.5, but overall it was just a little bit disappointing, because the setup to this story is so incredible and so unique, and then the execution just really fell short for me. The premise of this book is that we have a little, I was gonna say little girl, but she's 14. Well, she was 14. A 14-year-old ghost named Blanca, and she has been dead for like 300 years in this island of Mallorca in Spain, and she is inside this old convent, I think, and she's haunting it. And so in the 19th century, a family arrives. We have Frédéric Chopin, the pianist, and his wife George Sand, and their 2 children. And it's basically about how Blanca is rediscovering her sexuality in death, right? So she used to fall for men. We have a whole backstory. It's a dual timeline situation. And then we have her rediscovering her sexuality and affirming herself as a queer ghost who is falling in love with George Sand, the wife of Frédéric Chopin. I will say that this book, and this might seem much harsher than what I mean it to be, was very empty, right? I didn't really enjoy the dual timeline. I know that it's set in medieval times, like we have a girl who died in the 15th century, I know that. but I wish she was a little bit older, because the things that I was reading that she was doing and thinking and experiencing at 14 was very heartbreaking. I know that was the point. I know that's the point of exploring Blanca's traumas and saying how young she was. But when we have a ghost, and it's very weird because, well, she's not 14 anymore. She has been alive for more than but she has been a ghost for over 300 years. But she still manifests as a 14-year-old, right? And her falling in love with an adult woman is just weird. I'm sorry, it's weird. I know it's just a crush, but it felt really weird to me. And overall, it was just very empty. I didn't really like the story of the family, and I just didn't really like the plot. We had an interesting aspect in which Blanca can actually enter the heads of the people around her. She can see their memories, and she can see their past, and she can also see their future, which was an interesting aspect of it. But overall, I just didn't really feel like the execution delivered on this amazing premise. And I just found some of the points to be a little bit lacking. The writing also wasn't great. So it was a disappointment overall, but I feel like I still enjoyed it more than I disliked it. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably a 3. But there were some moments where I was into it. So I feel like a 3.5 stands nicely, but I was expecting a whole lot more out of this book because of this amazing premise. Next up, we have 3 really solid 4-star reads. I'm going to start with the one that I don't own physically, and that is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is a novella set in Ireland, and it talks about the Magdalene sisters and the Magdalene schools for girls, and it was just very heartbreaking. We follow a woodworker who delivers wood to one of these schools, and though it's not gratuitous, it's not graphic, you don't see anything that will traumatize you, I guess. The story in itself is so real and so tragic, and I already knew a little bit about it, but just seeing this from another perspective in the 80s was really hard to read. I love the writing. I really want to read other Claire Keegan novellas and books, and I overall really enjoyed this. It was a very solid 4-star read for me. It's not like an all-time favorite or anything, but yeah, it did really leave me interested to read other books by this author, and just bringing this topic to light, which is such a recent and horrible topic, I feel like was a good choice by this author, and something that I just thought very fondly of. Then we have a book that I'm not going to talk a lot about. I'm just going to say that I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought that I would. And that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This kind of ate. I wasn't expecting it to, but it kind of ate. And it's not life-changing. Okay, I haven't been like itching to read the second one. I haven't been thinking about it all day. But this kind of ate. So stay tuned to the vlog where I read this book, but I moved a little. Then we have another book that I'm not going to talk a lot about because I just did my quarterly wrap-up where I discussed this book, and there's also a vlog on it. But we have Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. What a great book. This is a story set in an unnamed country that is going through a civil war, in which a young couple that is just trying to get to know each other has to escape through these doors that show up, and they are heavily guarded by the military. And it's just honestly just a story and an allegory. It's not really an allegory because it is about war, but it's a little bit of an allegory about what it means to be a migrant, what it means to live in a war-torn country, and just I feel like it pairs really well the horrific aspect of war and the graphic details of war with just the mundane day-to-day life, falling in love, and getting to know someone. I feel like the author did a really great job doing this intercalation of topics, and I really want to read more from this author. So this was a total win, and I think that you should read it. On to the last two books. These are two books that I picked up from my library that I have given back already because it has been a million years since I read them. And the first one is The Happening, or The Event, by Annie Ernaux. This is a French author who just very recently won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And this is a novella. I think it's autobiographical, or like autobiographical fiction, because this is about her as a 20-year-old in the 60s in France when she discovers that she's pregnant and she's trying not to be. So it's about that. It was so difficult to read. Like, I have never been more pro like women's rights than ever, pro-choice, because this was such a difficult book to read. Like, if you're triggered by anything, pregnancy, loss of pregnancy, abortion, don't read this book, because it is very intense. And it's basically about how this event and this happening just haunted her for the rest of her life, and how she just dealt with it throughout her life. And it was just very beautiful. I give it 4.5. I really loved it, but it was also very hard to read and very haunting, but really beautiful, because it is this her looking back on this event and looking also at like journal entries that she had during this time, who she talked to, how she acted. And it's just very, yeah, it was just something. It was just something special. And yeah, I really want to read other books by this author now, because she is very talented. And finally, we have another book that was also really hard to read. Like, guys, now that I'm looking back, these were kind of 2 intense months of reading, because I read A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is a book that I've been meaning to read for a couple of years now. It's been on BookTube for a long time, and I had never had the push to read it. And then one day I saw it at the library. There's also a vlog on it. And I just decided, okay, now is the time to read this book. And it's basically about our main character, whose name I cannot remember for the life of me, but a boy, a 12-year-old boy or a 14-year-old boy, something like that, whose mother is dealing with cancer, and just how he deals with that, and the fact that there's this monster who keeps appearing every night to haunt him, to help him. You don't really know. And I read the edition that also had like these beautiful illustrations. And yeah, what a hard book to read. I really felt for this young child whose name I cannot remember for the life of me, but I really felt for him in this situation. It was really heartbreaking, and I didn't cry, but I felt it in my soul. Okay, it was really great. I also gave it a 4.5. These two were my favorites of the months in which I read them. And yeah, it was just, I'm so glad that I finally read this book. All right, and that is my March and April wrap up. I'm so proud, mostly of me reading so many books off of my physical TBR. Like, I really did that, and that's something to be proud of. Let me know which one was your favorite book in March or April, and if you did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content, and I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.